If you don't mind, stay standing just for a moment. I'd love to read our anchor text today. It comes from Luke chapter 19, and it's literally an example of Jesus living this out. It says in Luke 19, verse 1, "And Jesus entered Jericho and was passing through. And there was a man called by the name of Zacchaeus. He was a chief tax collector, and he was rich. Zacchaeus was trying to see who Jesus was." I want you to pay attention to that phrase. He was trying to see who Jesus was. And he was unable because of the crowd, for he was small in stature. So he ran on ahead and he climbed up in a sycamore tree in order to see him, for he was about to pass through that way. When Jesus came to that place, he looked up and he said to him, "Zacchaeus, hurry and come down, for today I must stay at your house." And he hurried and he came down and he received him gladly. And when they saw it, they all began to grumble, saying, "He's gone to be the guest of a man who is a sinner." Zacchaeus stopped and he said to the Lord, "Behold, Lord, half of my possessions I will give to the poor, and if I've defrauded anyone of anything, I will give it back 4 times as much." And Jesus said to him, "Today salvation has come to this house, because he too is the son of Abraham. For the Son of Man has come to seek and to save that which is lost." Heavenly Father, would you help us to learn from your word today? Help us to learn how to live like you. It's in Jesus' name we pray. Amen. Amen. Well, you may be seated. We're so glad you're here. It's been an incredible morning already to get to celebrate baptism with Haley and just to see all the other things God's doing across campus. August is going to be incredible. How many of you are ready for back to school? Holy cow. How is August already here? That's amazing. It's amazing. So we're praying for you. We love you guys. We're praying for educators and mamas and daddies and guardian and all the rest. It's going to be incredible. I do want to invite you, make this month a priority as you get back into a normal rhythm. Make church part of the rhythm. God's doing some really cool things. We think that church ought to be easy, meaning that you shouldn't dread it, like you should actually enjoy being part of it, and ought to be life-giving. And so this month has a lot of cool opportunities. I can't tell you about all of them. I alluded to it earlier, but God's opening some incredible doors. A couple of things I am excited about. Next Sunday, Pastor Chuck is back, and he's got an incredible teaching about discovering your purpose in life and what God has for you in him. It's also Choir Sunday, so there's still time. If you want to jump into Choir Sunday, come to rehearsal Wednesday night and jump in next Sunday for Choir Sunday. Then the Sunday after that, Pastor Chuck and I are actually giving away a brand new book that he and I have been working on over this last year. And so for everybody that's on campus, you get a free copy of it. And if you want us to, we'll sign it, and you can sell it on eBay for 99 cents. I don't know. That won't go very far. But we're excited about it. Our whole prayer is to help people have a bigger faith. And so that'll be releasing the next Sunday. And then the last Sunday of the month, we're going to have a massive fair out in the lobby, meaning that if you're still looking for a group or if you're looking for a place to serve, we're going to try to have a bunch of cool opportunities for you to jump in. So make Sundays a priority. I know everything's not about Sunday, but we think it's important to be involved in the life of the ministry. So today, we're wrapping up a 3-part series called The Jesus Way. And Jesus himself said this in John 10:10. He said, "There's a thief, and when the thief comes," talking about the enemy, "he comes to steal, kill, and destroy." And I think all of us have felt the results of that. We live in this fallen world that has so much drama going on. There's so much heartache. And I think we would agree the thief has come to steal, kill, and destroy. But Jesus says, "But I have come that you may have" what? That you may have life. And he doesn't just talk about any kind of life. He doesn't talk about a full schedule but an unfulfilled life. He doesn't talk about being highly caffeinated and stressed out all the time. And I've had too much caffeine today. I got stung 7 times by yellow jackets yesterday, and so I'm on Benadryl and caffeine at the same time. So I don't know what's going to come out today. You just don't know. There's like this battle going on inside my blood right now. Does the Benadryl win? Does the caffeine win? I don't know. Jesus says, "I've come that you may have life and have it." How does Jesus describe it? Abundantly. A better kind of life. A different kind of life, right? And so Jesus, I think, probably was the most important or the funnest person in the room. I think Jesus was full of joy and happiness and gladness. I think sometimes when we picture Jesus, we think he's some grumpy guy, but man, people wanted to be around him. Jesus had a different way of life. So we've been asking this question, what if Jesus is right? What if Jesus is right? There is a better kind of life. And so what we've done is we've taken a few weeks to say, what does that life look like? And honestly, this is just a teaser because there's no way in 3 weeks we could talk about all the implications. So my friend and I are actually going to beta test a cohort this fall that's 9 weeks on the Jesus way. And it comes modeled after a book of a friend of mine called Practicing the Way, just a way of distilling lots and lots of how do we grow up spiritually into bite-sized format. And so I want to encourage you to be part of that. But one of the frustrations that I found for a lot of us is we're like, how do I even know how to do this? Right? How do I even know how to live this out? Is there any clear way to do it? Because growing up, I would hear people talk about, you got to live for Jesus. And because in Mississippi, that's the way you say Jesus. You don't just say Jesus, say Jesus, right? You got to live for Jesus. I'm like, what does that even look like? And so I've spent a lot of my adult life trying to figure that out. I went to Ole Miss for a little while, then I transferred to a small Bible college in Memphis, and I started taking Bible classes. And they had this class called Spiritual Formation. I was like, what does that even mean? And how do you become like Jesus? And then I started reading all these books, and these books would say, here's 3 things that every Christ follower needs to do. And so I'm a note taker. So I was like, all right, here's the 3 things. Here's the 3 ways to live the Jesus way. And then when I went to seminary, I actually did a 96 hours Master of Divinity degree right out of college. And in seminary, it wasn't 3 things. It was like, here's the 4 things. I'm like, okay, so it's not 3, it's 4. So let me write those down. And then I'd go to some, Christian conference, and they'd say, here's the 14 keys on how to, I'm like, which is it? Is it 3? Is it 4? Is it 14? Like, what's the answer? And what I found is sometimes living like Jesus and people saying, you got to be like Jesus feels almost like trying to put together an IKEA couch. Do you know what I'm talking about? I don't think there's enough instructions to put together anything from IKEA without losing your faith and praying harder, right? You know what I'm talking about? Sometimes it feels like there's not enough instruction. So we thought it would be fun to put one of our newest team members, Parker Gowan, who's part of our student team, on the spot and give him a project to do without giving him a lot of instructions. And I'll let you guess how that turns out. Check out the screens for this picture of what it looks like not to have enough instruction.
Parker, thanks for being here today. We appreciate you jumping in. Your mission, should you choose to accept it, is to use these tools and these materials to build a birdhouse in the next 5 minutes.
Okay, I don't know. Okay.
Some of these tools may be more helpful than others, so it's your job to sort through them, figure out which tools might help you the most. We've got extra materials here, should you need it.
I think this is too dangerous for me.
We want to make sure this is OSHA compliant.
Thank you. This makes me feel protected.
Have you ever built a birdhouse before?
Maybe when I was 2.
All right, well, we've got some instructions here. I think they're in Mongolian. Do you speak Mongolian?
I only speak Mandarin.
All right. Okay, well, we'll have to roll with it. You got 5 minutes to build the best birdhouse you can build. Your time starts now. Parker, it was a great effort. You put a lot of work into it. What we're going to do now is reveal the birdhouse for everybody to see.
I'm really proud of this. I want you guys to know I worked so hard on it. And if you don't like it, well, I don't really blame you.
Y'all want to see the final product? Here comes Parker's birdhouse. When I saw him breaking out the painter's tape, I was like, we got something going on here. We got something going on here. This will be, I don't know if he has his Etsy shop quite up yet, but if in case you need that Parker Gowan at Etsy right there. So this is what happens, right? Sometimes life feels this way. Like, good luck with that. Hope you figure it out. Live like Jesus. Let's see what happens when you actually have good instructions on how to build a birdhouse. Check this one out. This is like the Ritz-Carlton of birdhouses right here. Like, this is the kind of birdhouse that your neighborhood birds are like, I'm never leaving. I don't know, does it come with a butler? Wouldn't it be amazing if instead of trying to figure it out, we're like, are there actual instructions? Like, how does that actually work? Well, what's interesting about discipleship is that it's not a foreign term. Like, discipleship, it didn't actually start with Jesus. This whole idea of becoming like someone was actually part of the Hebrew culture. rabbis would invite people to follow them. That was essentially the invitation. Hey, follow me. And so what would happen is these young Jewish guys, they would graduate from school essentially, and their hope was maybe a rabbi would pick me. Maybe a rabbi would say, hey, you follow me. And so it was a process. And the three goals of any disciple are the instructions for us. Goal number one is to be with your rabbi, in our case, to be with Jesus. And so that's why on week one, we talked about this whole idea of abiding. Like, you got to stay close to him. And then the second goal of anybody that would follow their rabbi was to become like their rabbi. And so they'd be with their rabbi 24/7, eat, sleep, drink, all the things, public ministry. And so the goal was to become like them in that process. So last week, we talked about that frustration of how, for a lot of us, we want to change, but we're like, how does God actually bring change? And what really resonated with me, two things. One is you can't think your way into Christ-likeness, right? There's not enough books. There's not an instant download. If the answer is more information, I'd be further down the road than I am today. So it's not just a thinking thing, it's a living thing. And then the second thing that really stood out to me from last week is the litmus test is, am I becoming more of a person of love? Jesus said, love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength. Love your neighbor as yourself. So at the end of the day, if I'm becoming more like Jesus, the chief way I would know that is, am I becoming more loving? And then the third goal of anybody that was a disciple is they would do what their rabbi did. In our case, to do what Jesus did. So there actually is a game plan. And it's similar. It's not dissimilar to corporate training. A lot of times in corporate training, when you bring somebody on, hopefully they don't just start, on day one, they're not like, hey, just figure it all out yourself. In fact, a lot of times the training program is something like this. Number one, I do it while you watch, right? This is how we start in a lot of jobs. Hey, I'm going to do the task, you watch. And so sometimes you're shadowing somebody. Sometimes now, even with technology, you create a little Loom video. Hey, I'm going to show you how to do this. I'm going to do it while you watch. But stage number two is I do it, and I'm going to invite you to help. I'm going to invite you to help. So I'm going to do this project, but I need your help. I'm going to give you a piece of it, and I want you to come alongside and help me with it. Stage three of training somebody is now you do it while I help. So I'm going to let you do it, but I'm still going to be here. I'm available. I'm going to help you where I can. And then stage number four is you do it, and I'm going to watch. And this is not dissimilar to what Jesus did. When you read the Gospels, Jesus called his disciples to follow him. The disciples lived with Jesus. They started adopting his practices and way of life. Jesus then sends them out to do ministry on their own. And then ultimately in Matthew 28, Jesus commissions them and now says, go and make new disciples. So we have a game plan, right? We don't have to wonder. We don't have to get the little toy saw out and try to figure it out. He's given us a model. So the tension is to learn from the model and then to live it out. And so today, I just want to give you three ideas around how we can do as Jesus did, how we can live this out. And again, this is just a prepper for those that want to jump into this 9-week cohort, because there's so much more we could say about it. But right out of Luke 19, we see a picture. And here's the first thing. Number one, if you're a note taker, and these are also in the Sugar Hill Church app. Number one, Jesus always remained true to his agenda. Jesus remained true to his agenda. So in Luke 19, it says he entered Jericho. He was passing through. So we get the sense of Jesus is on ministry. Jesus is on mission. He's going from place to place, from city to city. He's just 12 miles away from going to the cross. And while he's on his way, there's sort of an interruption. And that's the way a lot of ministry happens, honestly, is it happens during moments of interruption. It's not when we planned out our whole life. It's those moments that pop up along the way. And here's what's interesting is Jesus is interruptible. He didn't lose his temper. He's like, he didn't look at his calendar on his iPhone because he's not an Android user. A little stab there. Anyway, it wasn't funny, but I'll keep moving. Jesus wasn't like, hey, Jesus had the most important mission on the planet, and yet he was willing to be interrupted. And what's interesting is the guy that interrupts him, or the guy that catches his attention and causes him to stop in his tracks, is Zacchaeus. And what we learn about Zacchaeus is he's not popular. Why is he not popular? Because he's a tax collector and he's rich. And so tax collectors in their day made their money by ripping people off. They would overcharge. And so if the government said to the tax collector, to Zacchaeus, Zacchaeus, you need to go to James and you need to collect $50 tax from James, the way that Zacchaeus would make his money is by upselling that. He would go to James, and instead of saying, give me $50, he'd say, give me $100, give me $200. And so what would happen is Zacchaeus would take the $200, he would he would send 50 onto the government, and he would pocket the rest. And so in their day, tax collectors were hated. Now that I say that out loud, not much has changed, has it? Hopefully we don't have any IRS folks in the room. I don't know. And so Zacchaeus was not liked. And what we also learn about him is he's small in stature. So he's not a tall dude. And so as Jesus is traveling through, there's such a crowd around Jesus that Zacchaeus can't even see him. He's like on his tippy toes. Where's Jesus? Hey, Jesus is coming through. Jesus is coming through. And here's what's interesting. When you look at this verse, it says in verse 4, so he ran on ahead. He climbed up in a sycamore tree in order to see Jesus. And I can't help but to think that phrase describes our generation. That yes, our world is crazy. And yes, there is drama. There's a lot of heartbreak. There's a lot of things going on in our world that are terrible. They are literally terrible. But I think at the same time, there's a generation of Zacchaeus people that are trying to see Jesus. The Bible says in Ecclesiastes that eternity is set in every man's heart, which means we all come into this world sensing that there's something missing, sensing that there's something broken. There's a lot of us in this world, maybe they wouldn't know how to describe it, but they've experienced the thief stealing, killing, and destroying. Like they've felt the ramifications of that. And maybe it's through Sugar Hill Church. Maybe it's through people living it out in the world. Maybe it's through hearing, preaching, or teaching, or serving, or one of the other many ways. But they show up and they're just trying to get a glimpse of Jesus. And what's interesting is Jesus is passing through. The crowd is so large that Zacchaeus can't get close. And so he climbs up into this tree looking down. And what's interesting is you think about the crowd that's around Jesus. Surely there was normal folks around him, but a lot of times when Jesus went from place to place, the religious leaders would show up, and the religious leaders would try to sidetrack Jesus. Hey, Jesus, the Pharisees say this. What do you say? The Bible says this. What do you say? And they would try to trip Jesus up, and every single time they would try to co-opt his mission. And every single time they would try to get him to sign on to their cause, their thing, whatever they're passionate about. And what's interesting is Jesus in this moment stops in his tracks. Jesus in this moment doesn't get distracted by the religious leaders. He doesn't get pulled off track into a million different ways. In this moment, Jesus stays true to his agenda. Look what he says in verse 10. When everybody's trying to get his attention, when everybody's trying to pull him off track, when everybody's trying to get him to sign on to their cause, their thing, Jesus says it so crystal clear in verse 10. He says, for the Son of Man has come to seek and to save that which was what? Lost. Over and over again, Jesus remained true to his agenda, which is a way of saying he knew what his mission was. When he's on this earth, there's a lot of things he could have done. There's a lot of debates he could have gotten involved in. There's a lot of causes he could have gotten fired up about. But at the end of the day, the one thing that Jesus said, I must do, I must seek and to save. I must seek and to save. I must seek and to save that which is lost. That was his mission. And for people that want to be like Jesus and become like Jesus and do what he did, we've got a part of that mission. When Jesus commissioned his disciples in Matthew 28, he basically said, I'm the light of the world, but I'm only going to be with you a little while longer. Now tag, you're it. Now you're the light of the world. And he said, go and make disciples. And so everywhere we go and everything that we do, everybody that we're around are people that matter to Jesus. In Luke 19, I guarantee you the Pharisees weren't looking for Zacchaeus. The religious leaders weren't like, hey, let's help this guy. But when Jesus saw Zacchaeus up in the tree, Jesus was like, I want to help that guy get out of the tree and into the faith. Why? Because everybody spends forever somewhere. Everybody is made in the image of God. Everybody is meant to be able to know God and discover their purpose in him. And when Jesus saw Zacchaeus up in the tree, Jesus didn't go, I can't believe that guy. Look at that guy, that knucklehead. When Jesus saw that guy in the tree, he didn't say, I can't believe him. I hope he figures it out. When Jesus saw him, he looks up and he is reminded of his mission. I've come to seek and to save, to seek and to save, to seek and to save that which is lost. That word lost is a word that means that something is out of place. or it means that something is in a place that it doesn't belong. When Jesus saw Zacchaeus, he was out of place. Zacchaeus, you're not meant to live in a sycamore tree. And when we look at the world around us, they're not meant to live without a relationship with God. Does that make sense? Every single person is going to spend forever somewhere. Every single person is meant to have a relationship with Jesus. And the way that Jesus lives that mission out today is through you and me. We're to help people get out of the tree. Now, for some of you, you're new to faith, and you're like, man, I get it. Like, I get what it feels like to be Zacchaeus. But to be honest with you, there's some of us that have been around church, or we've been around Christ a long, long time. And man, I'm fortunate. I was introduced to Jesus at a young age, and I have to remind myself, because if I'm not careful, I'll forget what it feels like to be lost. And if we're not careful, in the middle of doing all the church stuff that's great and helpful, somewhere along the way, we've got to remember what it feels like to be lost, and we've got to have a heart to say, if Jesus was on mission to seek and to save that which is lost, how can I be on mission to do that? That every single person we meet is going to spend forever somewhere. Every single person we meet is meant to have a relationship with Jesus. Every single person we meet can be forgiven and restored. Every single person we meet matters to God. So number one, let's remain true to our agenda. That's why we don't slow down at Sugar Hill Church. Sometimes people are like, how come y'all keep doing new initiatives? And how come you keep expanding? And why do you keep teasing that there's more coming? Because we believe every single person matters. They're made in the image of God. Every single person is going to spend forever somewhere. So while we're on earth, number one, we're going to remain true to our agenda, seeking to save that which is lost. Does that make sense? Not only that, number two, the second piece is that Jesus was always relationally authentic. Jesus was always relationally authentic. I alluded to this earlier, but I think sometimes when we think about Jesus, we think he was grumpy, or we think he was hurried, or all those things. I think Jesus was the best person to be around at a party. I think Jesus was the life of the party. I think Jesus was that person that you're around. And you're like, man, I want to be with him. And what's interesting is when Jesus came to this place, again, all these religious leaders are around Jesus. All these uppity-ups are around him. But look what it says in this passage. It says, when Jesus came to this place in verse 5, Jesus looked up and he said, hey, sinner. Is that what he said? Hey, outcast. Tax collector. No, he calls him by name. I just want you to picture that for a minute. Jesus has the most important mission on the planet. He's on the way to the cross. Jesus has all of these insiders around him. And yet Jesus stops where he's at. He looks up, he makes eye contact with them, and he calls him by name. This is Jesus modeling authenticity. This is Jesus modeling relationship. This is Jesus inviting him out of the tree into the faith. And that's what this whole 3 weeks is about. It's just an invitation. I'm not saying I have this all figured out, but what I am saying is that Jesus was relational, and shouldn't we be as well? Jesus could have preached another sermon to him. He could have gone off on him. He could have beat him up, but instead he used body language of authenticity. He stops, he calls him out. The crowd stops, and he calls him by name and says, I must come to your place today. And this isn't the only time Jesus does this. I mean, Jesus modeled authenticity. Think about when his best friend Lazarus died. Lazarus' sisters were ticked off at Jesus. Jesus, where were you? Jesus, you've healed all these random people all these years. Now we sent word to you that your best friend is sick, and you waited 4 days to come, and now he's dead. Jesus, where were you if you had been here? And the shortest verse in all of Scripture is Jesus wept. He modeled authenticity. Or even in the temple, Jesus modeled righteous anger when he walked into the temple and he saw people making profit out of the things of God. He flipped the tables, and Jesus was relationally open. He was authentic. He wasn't afraid to let people see him. I mean, what made Jesus different? I mean, certainly he had great sermons. Certainly he had great messages. Certainly he did incredible things. But one of the things that made Jesus so powerful wasn't that he had a message. It was that he was the message. Right? He was everything he claimed to be. And because of that, tax collectors, sinners, outcasts, prostitutes, all these people were drawn to him. Yes, they knew he was different, but ultimately they knew that he was real. maybe we've underestimated the power of being in relationship with people. I was reading one author this week who made the point. He said, in the Gospel of Luke, Jesus says the Son of Man 2 different times. He says, one time, Jesus says, the Son of Man has come to seek and to save that which is lost. And then the second time he said it is the Son of Man came to eat and drink with sinners. He said, what if those two things aren't by accident? What if the mission of Jesus to seek and save that which is lost? And what if the primary method Jesus did it was through relational meals with people? I was like, man, sign me up for some tacos with Jesus. I'm all about that. I just want you to begin to think about what's our version of that, right? If we're to remain true to the agenda of Jesus, do we feel commissioned to say, man, I'm gonna be part of the rescue mission of seeking and saving that which is lost. I'm gonna be part of it, my part, whatever that is. And then number 2, to think about relationally authentic. What is our version of that? Maybe it is a meal. Maybe it is having dinner club at your house once a month, and you just invite neighbors over, and through that time, you develop relationships. Maybe it's going across the street after church and having lunch with some people around you that you don't know so well. But maybe it's something different. Maybe your thing is, what I found is that guys aren't great at talking to one another when they're actually looking at each other. They need some sort of distraction. So maybe you need to take a friend on the golf course or something about not looking at each other that guys suddenly start talking. I don't know what's up with that. Or maybe it's fishing. Maybe it's whatever that thing may be. But what if we have a part in relationally connecting with people so that they see Jesus? Jesus knew that authenticity builds bridges into other people's lives. So how do we do what Jesus did? Number 1, remain true to his agenda, seeking to save that which is lost. You've got a part in it. I've got a part. Number 2, be relationally authentic. Jesus didn't just have a message. He was the message. He lived it out. And what that means for you and I is we don't have to be perfect. Man, none of us have it all together. But be real with people. And finally, number 3, Jesus was always redemptive in his approach. Jesus was always redemptive. He didn't say to Zacchaeus, all right, come down, you sit down, I'm going to stand up because I'm smart and you're not, and I'm going to tell you, here's the 3 things to do. He didn't do that. In fact, what's interesting is when Jesus engages with Zacchaeus, the religious leaders got ticked off. Here's what it says about Zacchaeus in verse 6. It says, and he hurried and he came down. I can't help but to think there's people in our world that would do that as well. We've got brothers and sisters, we've got neighbors, we've got aunts and uncles, we've got co-workers that are Zacchaeuses. They're in the tree, right? They're in the tree. They're hoping for something. And Zacchaeus hurries and comes down and received him. Verse 7, and when they saw it, who? The religious leaders, the insiders, the people that have been around Jesus, when they saw it, they all began to grumble. They got ticked off. They all began to grumble, saying, he's gone to be the guest of a man who is a sinner. Whenever I see that or say that, I think back to middle school. I'm like, sinner, right? It just flashbacks to my middle school years. Sinner. The very people that should have been the happiest. The very people that claim to be on mission with God. The very people that claim to be experts in the law, they got ticked off because they're like, this man's gone to be the guest of a man who's a sinner. And Jesus says in verse 9, today salvation has come to this house because he too is the son of Abraham. What Jesus says is Zacchaeus gets in the same way Abraham did, through faith. And ultimately what happens is Jesus was redemptive to this person that felt 1,000,000 miles away from God. Let me give you quickly some ways Jesus did this. One of the ways Jesus models for us on how to do that is he always acted like a servant. If there's anybody that deserved to be served, I think it's Jesus. He's God. He left heaven, came to this earth. If anybody deserves to be served, I think it's Jesus. But Jesus himself said, I did not come to be served, but to what? To serve. That's why we talk about serving so much. Some people are like, why do y'all talk about serving so much? It's a way that we become more like Jesus. It's a way we become more like Jesus. Second way Jesus models this is not only acting like a servant, but B, he spoke like a shepherd. He spoke like a shepherd. You know, sheep aren't always known for being smart. I told one of the services about this last week or the week before about the YouTube video of the sheep that gets stuck in a ditch, and the shepherd gets in the ditch, helps them out, and then like 5 seconds later, the sheep jumps along and gets back in the ditch again. I'm like, that's me, right? That's me. I've been there. And Jesus doesn't beat this guy up. He doesn't say, I can't believe you, sinner. No, Jesus spoke like a shepherd, meaning he drew him into relationship. And the third way is C, Jesus related as a friend. Jesus related as a friend. Out of all the names Jesus could have been called, Wonderful Counselor, Mighty God, Prince of Peace, Everlasting Father, out of all the names Jesus could have said, hey, call me this. Jesus said to his followers, I want you to call me your friend. He's redemptive. And I got to be honest, I need to be reminded of that. Because sometimes when we disconnect and we live in our little echo chamber, it's easy for us to think us versus them. It's easy for us to get all fired up and to forget that it's not us versus them. It is us and them. It's us together. Every single person is made in the image of God. Every single person can know God and discover their purpose in him. Every single person is going to spend forever somewhere. And I want to be like Jesus. I want to stay true to that agenda. How do I help seeking to save that which is lost? I want to be part of relationally connecting to build bridges for the sake of eternity. And man, if I could be like Jesus, I want to be redemptive. Now, I used to wonder, when we get to heaven, what's it going to be like? I heard some sermons as a kid that made me think that maybe one day when we're in heaven, there's going to be this huge LED screen and God's going to show every single sin we've ever done. I'm like, I don't know if I want that. But the older I get, the more I think, if there's a giant screen in heaven and if there's a video clip of our life, if there's anything that's shown, I think he would edit down our lives to a 30-second clip that shows every single time we acted like a servant, every single time we spoke like a shepherd, and every single time we related as a friend. Because at the end of the day and into eternity, what really matters is, did we become more like Jesus? Does that make sense? Let's be like him. And so to wrap this up, again, there's no way I could go into all of this. And so I'd love for you, if you want to go deeper, text the word WAY, W-A-Y, for the Jesus way. Text the word WAY to the number on the screen, and you'll get some resources dripped this week, and that'll also be the list that we talk about this cohort that's coming up this fall, and so I'd love for you to text with that. But a second way that I wanted to illustrate this idea of joining Jesus and doing what Jesus did, so I want to invite my friend Jim from Path United to come and join me. Some of you have been around Sugar Hill Church for a while, and you are very, very familiar with our work in Peachtree Village, and you're very familiar with Path, but if you haven't been exposed to that yet, would you show some Sugar Hill love to Jim as he comes? And man, I'd love for us to talk about that today. Jim Hollingsworth and his wife have become great friends and partners in our ministry, and your sport, the Path United Church, which is amazing. Amazing. For those that are new around here that haven't heard of Path before, give us a little thumbnail. Like, what's Path about? What do you do?
Yeah, well, hey, thanks, guys. Thanks for the time. I'll go quick. So at Path United, we work with kids and families that live in mobile home communities here in Gwinnett, but also in Hall County, Barrow County, Walton County, and a neighborhood in Tennessee. So we operate community centers inside those neighborhoods. So picture a Boys and Girls Club type model. Kids come after school to our programming. We have volunteers and staff that do after-school programs, homework help, mentoring, really just relationship-driven, daily activities.
And you've been doing it a while now. Tell us a little bit, how do you got into this? Like, was this part of your master plan of how I want to spend the next couple of decades of my life, or how did you stumble into it?
Yeah. So it was not part of a master plan. So 15 years ago, my wife and I met a family that lived in a mobile home park 2 miles from our house where we live in Loganville, where we still live. She was a teacher. I was on staff at a local church there. We kind of had this life planned out, and then we drove into this neighborhood, and that was, like, when we look back, that was the moment that changed the direction of our life, and it wasn't anything we planned to do. All we did, so we were in a small group at church, and the local food ministry, the Southeast Gwinnett Co-op, had a Christmas sponsorship program happening, and they sent us some information, and we said, hey, we want to help and be part of it. So my wife and I just signed up with our small group to deliver the gifts. So all we did was react to a ministry opportunity through our church, and that moment was like, wow, it changed everything. So that kind of progressed into, like, getting to know this family. We got to know the kids, the parents. So the family were immigrants from Mexico. We didn't speak much Spanish. They didn't speak much English, so we tried to communicate. It was really, interesting those first couple times. But we came back, several times and kind of built a relationship, and that started a homework club that started to meet in the neighborhood once a week, and it grew from one neighborhood to multiple neighborhoods. So it's been a cool journey.
How many neighborhoods are you in now?
Yeah, so we work in 8 communities total. So starting in the one in Loganville, and it grew over the next few years. So 2009, 2010, the crazy story of how we got started is there was a shooting that happened in the neighborhood in Loganville right after we started this homework club. And it was in one of the homes. And the property manager came to me and said, hey, do you want this home where the shooting happened to do your homework club?
That's an interesting call.
Yeah, it was an interesting call. And then
because essentially nobody wanted to live in that home now.
Yeah, so it was abandoned. It was
Yeah.
abandoned, crime scene. It was really, really bad. The caveat was I had to go meet the drug dealer who owned the house at a gas station to get the title. So if people that know me well or know, like, I'm not the kind of guy, like, I'm like the last guy, like, who would.
I feel like you're a walking Dateline episode or something. I'm not sure, right? Pastor walks into a drug deal, right?
Kind of blocked it out. Said,
Well, let me just pull it out of you here. Let's do a little, no. So you were on staff at a church and start taking these steps, and at some point, this one community, so you planted there, and it began to grow. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, so it grew through a couple things. So we were doing work in one neighborhood in Loganville, and then another church in Loganville, just down the street, First Baptist Loganville, called us and said, hey, there's a mobile home park right near our church. We'd love to get involved. We heard about y'all were doing. Can y'all work with us? Well, it just so happens that neighborhood was owned by the same company that owned the neighborhood where we were. So we had some expansion going locally with some church partners, but also through this company that owned the mobile home park in Loganville. They came to us and said, hey, we like what you're doing. We own a bunch of parks throughout the Southeast. Will y'all work with us? So they gave us a free place to meet in other neighborhoods and started investing financially. And that's actually the cool connection here in Sugar Hill. So in 2012, my wife and I, we were recognized briefly at a UGA home football game. We're both UGA alumni, and so they did a little award for alumni who were doing some service stuff. So we were on the field for just a couple minutes. Me being like young and naive, I was like, oh, there's 92,000 people here. Maybe someone will call and donate some money or something. And no one called. It was
You're right, this big moment and nothing.
Have you ever had that feeling, right? So no one called immediately. However, several months later, I got a call from someone from Sugar Hill Church named Susan Roebuck. Many of you may know Susan or knew Susan. She was just the best. And she was the catalyst for all of this. So what she did, she came to Loganville to see our work. She said, hey, there's a mobile home park in Sugar Hill. We want to do some ministry. So we brainstormed a little bit, but there was a closed door. The owners of the park at the time said, no, you can't come in here. So a couple of years go past, and I had forgotten about it. Well, in the same week, Susan reached back out and said, hey, remember that neighborhood in Sugar Hill? There's a new owner. Well, same week, the owners of the trailer park in Loganville called and said, hey, we bought a neighborhood in Sugar Hill. And so these things happened at the same time. Really, really cool. And so Susan and I reconnected, and we started working towards what it would look like to start Path here in Sugar Hill. So I met with Pastor Chuck and Bobby and the team here, and they were like, hey, we're all in. So this was 2016, 2017. So you guys as a church have been involved there. And we've had this happen in a few places. It's happened in Tennessee, in Gainesville, in Winder. Really cool to see local community come out. So that's how we've grown.
Yeah.
So it's a full-time job for me now, and overseeing all of our sites. So it's really it's really cool.
I love it. I love the story because it wasn't part of a master plan, but it's a reminder God's at work around us, right? There's these little nudges, and it just started with a small thing, and now it's impacting hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of students, but also their families, their family trees. What's the impact on the other side of Path for these?
Yeah, so it's a great question. When we started, we were really focused on what we heard from kids in those first few years, or what we met were teenagers who had dropped out of school, an overwhelming number. And so we said, hey, well, what if we help kids stay in school, graduate high school? That'll be the big win. And we've seen that happen. It's been really, really fun to see kids graduate, to become the first in their family to graduate. But we also recognize that, hey, that wasn't quite enough to get them where we feel like they're living this abundant life, right? So we really said, hey, we want to expand what we do, the impact more to helping these kids become, thriving, flourishing adults who are following Jesus, have healthy family, meaningful relationships. We've kind of expanded our work into that. So we have been able to see that happen. I mean, it's a long process, right? So sometimes our team, we try to measure little bits of success along the way because those of you, I mean, if you think about your own life or your kids, like it is a long journey to get someone from, being a child to a healthy, thriving adult. And so we're seeing that's really cool. Like I was telling somebody in the lobby between the services, after the first service, there are some of our students now that we met in middle school who are now the same age I was when I met them 15 years ago.
Wow.
So they now have kids and jobs and stuff. So it's really, seeing them kind of grow up and thrive is really, really fun.
It's amazing. We love Path. We have a handful of partners, and our thought behind partnership is we want people that know what they're doing. They already have a game plan, so we don't feel like Sugar Hill Church is meant to reinvent all the wheels. So we find partners that both our money and our people can go to for a long time. So we never want just a financial transaction, and we never want just we want both because we know that it takes time, as you're talking about, to make a lasting impact. And you may not know this, but every time you give, a part of what you give helps fund this site here in Peachtree Village. And your generosity matters. And every single time Pastor Chuck and I sit down with Jim and their team and talk about it, our prayer is we'd be able to see more Path projects open up. Like there's so many more students that need to experience this, not just for today, but it's going to impact eternity. And I love this model because the model is the love of Jesus through loving people makes an impact. And so you've got folks that are like, how do I get involved? Like, what are the different ways that somebody in this room or watching online could engage with Path?
Yeah, absolutely. So, we show up every day, less than 2 miles from where we're sitting, the neighborhood Peachtree Village. There's over 150 homes there. There's tons of kids who are in the schools here. We have after-school programming every Monday through Thursday afternoon in that neighborhood for kindergartners through high school students. If you're interested in showing up and being a part of it, this is the perfect time. We're starting our programs in a couple weeks. We're recruiting volunteers. We're getting ready. The vast majority of our volunteers work 1 hour, serve 1 hour a week with us. So we're not asking folks to come every day. So that's a big way is showing up. We know a lot of folks, though, that work late. You can't come in the afternoons to volunteer. So we're really kicking off trying to stock our community centers with snacks and supplies. So we have some information in the lobby if you're interested in, through Amazon or wherever you get groceries, getting a few extra and helping put those towards it. That's a huge
I'm guessing
way.
you go through a ton of snacks.
Yeah, we go through a lot of snacks. If y'all have kids eat, right?
Yeah.
They eat 10. They come over from school and they're hungry. So we don't do a full meal, but we try to just get them ready to kind of refocus for another hour or so. And then obviously, prayer support. That's a big way that you can serve with us. We just want people that want to love their neighbors and maybe there's a way they can use their gifts. So if you're interested, come talk to me. Myra, Joe, they're out there in the lobby as well after the service.
Last time Jim was with us, I think it was last time, but maybe it was the time before that, somebody in the room was like, hey, I work for a company that has charitable giving. Can I point them to that? Like, that turned into something, didn't it?
Yeah, it was really, 2 years ago, I was sitting right here, and there was someone that worked for Quick Trip and said, hey, my company does charitable giving locally, and someone asked him, hey, who should we give it to? And he said, well, I remember Path United from speaking at Sugar Hill Church, so maybe you've got a business that wants to give away some money. Well, we take that too.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, we're so grateful for our partnership with you. We're so grateful on multiple levels. One, to see a living example of somebody that just took a next step. Like, maybe your thing isn't to start a nonprofit, but maybe there is a step that God is inviting you to take to do what Jesus did. But then also, maybe you felt stuck and you're like, man, that story resonates with me. I could help volunteer occasionally, or I could help stock their snack pantry or whatever that is. And so I want to encourage you in two ways. One, in just a minute, Jim's going to be out in the lobby. There's a table, and some of the team from Path are out there. So I'd love for you to swing by and say hello and just thank them for what they do. And then two, if you're interested in getting more information, you can use the same number that we had on the screen earlier, and this time text the word PATH to it. Text the word PATH, and there's a simple way you can drop your information in there, and the team will get back with you over the next couple of days and just give you some next steps in doing that. But we're so grateful for partners like this that are making a difference now and for eternity. We should show some love to Jim and the PATH team. So grateful for you. Thanks for being with us today. Well, I'm going to invite our worship team out. Let's stand together. It's been an incredible day, and I hope over these last 3 weeks you've gotten a glimpse of Jesus literally does have a better way. When I asked the question at the beginning, what if Jesus is right? Of course I think Jesus is right. But I think sometimes we need to be reminded that maybe the way that we're living isn't actually working because it's not producing love. That's the way we know it. But when we follow the Jesus way, there is a better way. There's a deeper and richer way of life. And it doesn't happen overnight. It's not all up and to the right. It's a messy process. As we said last week, spiritual growth is possible, but it's not inevitable. And so it's us staying committed to be with Jesus, become like Jesus, and do what he did. That's my prayer. Let's be men and women that say, I want to be on mission with Jesus. I want to lead through relationships. And as I'm in these relationships, as best as I can, I want to be redemptive. Let's sing this out before we go. Love you guys. Have a great rest of your week. Let's lift this up.